for people to something from their life before. Humor is a weapon in many ways. First of all, it is a coping mechanism that helps to process all the emotions and information we are under, because the thing is, we are not only bombarded by missiles, but also by news. News come every second, and people are under huge stress. We all are scared for ourselves, for our relatives, for everyone. And when you can laugh at something, it is not so scary anymore, and it's more bearable, and it helps people. So for me, it's also what helps me to continue to do that, not only for myself, but also for other people.
Anna Kochagura, and Anna is still performing on the stages of Kiev.
Hi, I'm Jenny Slate. I'm an actress, comedian, and writer, and you are listening to The Cultural Frontline on the BBC World Service.
Female comedians are making a splash around the world, but for many it's been an uphill struggle to make their voices heard in what was once a very male-dominated industry. Cheryl Chan claims to be the first full-time female comedian in Singapore. Despite opposition, she's now a popular comic, determined to bring female topics to the stage and prove that women can be laugh-out-loud funny. She told me about her journey into comedy.
I have been in the scene for 11 years, and I joined the second wave of stand-up in Singapore. And I am the only full-time female stand-up comedian right now. That's how hard it is, I think, to make a living out of it, and also to break barriers, and also to be part of the boy gang in stand-up is not the easiest.
What are the major challenges you faced?
I think that one of the major challenges is being able to be a part of the scene, but also finding your own voice. You know, the men have their own voice, and there's certain things or that they're allowed to say by the Asian audiences, which I can't say. But now I've learned that I had to have my own voice and also practice my own truth, and yeah, that was one of the major challenges.
How do you feel about being the only full-time female comedian in Singapore?
I think it's a privilege, and I do get a lot of the gigs when they're looking for a woman for stand-up, but I think it's also, it doesn't challenge me enough, like when there are more women in the scene, you want to grow together, you want to help each other. I pray and wish that more women, become full-time with this career.
Why do you think there aren't more women in comedy there?
I think because stand-up started pretty late in Singapore or in Asia. In Southeast Asia, it's about 11 to 15 years old. Asian audiences, I think they're not used to women being on stage with a mic and, telling jokes, and they expect women to be, shy, of course, always, coy, sheepish, laughing, like cover their mouths when they laugh. And it's not been a natural conditioning for Asian women.
How did you get your first break then?
I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. There was an underground scene going on where it first started. It was an open mic, and there were very few local women jumping up. There were some expat women from overseas who were jumping up. And so they said, Cheryl, can you just come up and do a couple of jokes? I was from drama school, and my partner, who's now my husband, he started doing stand-up earlier. He jumped up on stage 6 months before me, so I used to watch him all the time and, give him feedback. And then, they said, Cheryl, just 2 minutes, come on, just 2-3 minutes, go up and say something, we need to fill a spot. And I went up, and when people started laughing at me, I got validation, and I said, this is a great profession because I get to say what I want to say and be my own writer, my own director, my own producer, and, build a career around telling the truth.
And when did you first realize you were funny?
I still don't think I'm so funny. No, when did I first realize? I think, being from an immigrant family, and my father moved here when I was a couple of months old, and, they were busy trying to make a living and bring us up and pay for our education, and that gave me a lot of time to be very judgmental with people around me and make fun of friends and relatives in my head. I used to do it maybe unconsciously at parties and, make fun of people and get into trouble. So I think it made sense when I jumped onto stage and then people were actually finding it funny. So I said, it's all come together.
If culturally it's something that isn't the norm there, how do audiences respond to you?
Initially, I had to use the shock value. I had to go out there and completely be in their faces so they get the attention, and then do jokes that were risky, get them uncomfortable in order for them to be reeled in before I could do material which I wanted to do. So I did start off with the race jokes, the sex jokes, and you name it. But you need to place some things to your advantage and push along.
And have you found, just more generally, people think you should take sexist jokes because you're a comedian and you should therefore have a sense of humour about it?
Yes, absolutely. I think people think just because you go up and, do sex jokes or about your sex life, they are allowed to also crack the same kind of jokes on you when you're off stage. They can't. It's just not okay, and they don't understand those boundaries. Not everybody does. But I think also we are right now in, people are confused. There's the two groups. One group is really woke, so they'll take offense to a lot of things, many things, which of course backfires on comedians because we say, hello, we need to do our jokes and not everything is to be taken seriously. And then there's another group that is too lax about it, and they think everything goes. You're a stand-up comedian, so we can say anything to you, So it's about finding the right balance, and I guess comedians are stuck in the middle of the two groups and trying to find what's okay to say and what's not okay to say.
So where do you fall between those extremes, or those on the spectrum, and what topics do you talk about in your routines?
Really, I talk more about my life experiences and, try to express my truth at that moment. I do stay off certain topics like rape and disasters where people have lost their lives. I don't talk about it. I do think it doesn't matter which career you're from. You need to have empathy. Which is why when the whole Chris Rock incident happened, nothing warrants like a physical assault or that kind of response. I did also think that I don't care how good a comedian you are on stage or how famous you are, you need to have empathy in your career.
Why is it important to laugh about some of the things that you talk about on stage? So women's issues, you mentioned COVID. Why is it important to laugh about those things?
When I do speak about women issues and I put a joke in there, it's so that I can talk about those women issues and they get a safe space to be expressed. Where else will people show up to listen to women issues? People run away from these things. And so people are listening, so they understand that I can put in nuggets of information and educate people, at the same time entertain them. I mean, I have those audiences who come in just because their spouse wants to watch me or they were dragged along.
Is it possible to educate them?
Yes. The moment I think they get uncomfortable, they're being educated. So somewhere the education is really happening when they're sitting there and they're stuck for the next 1.5 hours. So I think that the moment that stirring process happens in them, education has started. I think any comedian, anybody who has the privilege to put a mic to their face and also have an audience watching them can make a difference, whether it's women issues or it's for the LGBTQZ community or whether it's for Ukraine and Russia. I think comedians have a lot of power that way.
Cheryl Chan, and you can catch her performing in gigs around Singapore. And if you'd like to hear more from the world of arts and culture, then please tune in to the Arts Hour, also on the BBC World Service, where this week Nikki Beatty hears from filmmakers Dan Kwan and Daniel Scheinert on their multiverse movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That's it for this week's programme. Don't forget, you can also find our podcast on all your favourite podcast apps. Please subscribe. We'll be here same time next week with more stories of artists changing the world and the way we see it. Until then, goodbye.
This
This is the BBC World Service. And here's Anna Doble to tell you about Pick of the World.
From solar-powered ironing carts,
One charge can last 6 hours.
to an all-female Indonesian metal band, Pick of the World is all about your clicks, downloads and shares. Or I found out which BBC World Service stories have grabbed your attention online and on social media.
Pick of the World at bbcworldservice.com/Pick of the World. And in 30 minutes...
In The Other Side of Death Row, we examine the effects of having a relative facing execution on families of the condemned. We hear from one woman who's lived in the shadow of her brother's death sentence and hear about the long-term emotional impacts on her family.
Stay with us. The newsroom is next on the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
At 4 hours GMT, welcome to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. I'm Danny Cox. After this week's mass shooting in Texas, President Biden visits the town of Uvalde as he appeals for unity.
So I call on all Americans this hour. Join hands and make your voices heard. And work together to make this nation what it can and should be.
Real Madrid win the Champions League final, but the match was delayed by police using tear gas outside the stadium.
They're being pepper sprayed by French police. The anger of the people that I've spoken to is not like anything that I've experienced.
A criminal investigation begins in Nigeria after 31 people die in a stampede at a food distribution event. And later...
Can you relax your triangle of sadness? That's like between your eyebrows here.
Okay.
A little bit more.
The film that got an 8-minute standing ovation as it picked up one of cinema's top prizes. That's all still to come after this bulletin of world news.
Hello, I'm Tom Watts with the BBC News. President Biden has urged Americans to make their voices heard to prevent further gun violence following the mass shooting at a primary school in Texas. He is due to visit the town of Uvalde on Sunday, where 19 children and 2 teachers died when an 18-year-old went on the rampage with a semi-automatic rifle. Barbara Pletasha is there.
Just days ago, children cowered on the floor in this school as a killer armed with assault rifles stalked their classroom, the latest victims of a uniquely American tragedy. President Biden addressed the parents' heartbreak in a speech at a graduation ceremony.
Those parents are literally preparing to bury their children. In the United States of America, to bury their children. There's too much violence.
The massacre thrust the issue of gun control back into national focus. Gun rights activists said they were horrified by the violence, but the National Rifle Association went ahead with its convention in Texas.
The Vice President, Kamala Harris, has called for a ban on assault weapons. She was speaking at the funeral of one of 10 people killed in a supermarket shooting in Buffalo on the 14th of May. European football's governing body, UEFA, is to carry out a review with French authorities into security arrangements at Saturday evening's Champions League final. Dan Johnson, who was at the fan zone in Paris, has more details.
And there is criticism of the police and UEFA for a lack of organisation, which meant the kick-off had to be knocked back 35 minutes. We've had a statement from UEFA which says in the lead-up to the game, the turnstiles at the Liverpool end became blocked by thousands of fans who'd purchased fake tickets, which did not work in the turnstiles. As a result, the kick-off was delayed to allow as many fans as possible with genuine tickets to gain access. As numbers outside the stadium continued to build up after kick-off, the police dispersed them with tear gas and forced them away from the stadium. And even as fans have been leaving here, they've reported that the French police has been using tear gas.
Dan Johnson in Paris. In the match itself, Real Madrid beat Liverpool 1-0 to win the trophy for a record 14th time. A second-half goal by Vinicius Jr. was enough to settle the match. Delegates at the National Convention of Nigeria's main opposition party, the PDP, have chosen the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar as their candidate for next year's presidential elections. The governing party will hold its primaries next week. Ishaq Khalid reports.
Nearly 800 party delegates from across Nigeria voted in the opposition PDP primaries held in a packed stadium in the capital Abuja. The former Vice President Atiku Abubakar defeated several other aspirants. Mr. Atiku's campaign focuses on national unity, improving the economy and tackling insecurity. This is the 6th time Mr. Atiku is contesting the presidency of Africa's largest democracy and biggest economy.
World News from the BBC. At least 35 people have died in floods and mudslides in northeastern Brazil. Most were killed when their homes were buried in tons of mud following the collapse of a hillside in one of the poorest communities in the city of Recife. At least 1,000 people have been left homeless across the state of Pernambuco. The United States has expressed concern over what it described as China's efforts to restrict and manipulate the UN Human Rights Chief's visits to the western region of Xinjiang. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the conditions China imposed on Michelle Bachelet's visit did not enable a complete and independent assessment of human rights in Xinjiang. The Chinese authorities are accused of carrying out widespread abuses against Muslim Uyghurs there. Rights groups called Ms. Bachelet's visit a wholesale capitulation. Thousands of Israelis are due to hold a march later today through Muslim areas of Jerusalem's Old City, amid Palestinian warnings it could trigger violence. The flag march, which celebrates the capture of East Jerusalem during the 1967 war, comes at a time of high tension between Israelis and Palestinians. The British government will launch a consultation this week on bringing back imperial measurements. The latest announcement, a repeat of one made last year, coincides with Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee. Ben Wright explains.
This is an issue that's always caused quite a lot of passion, particularly among people who are pro-Brexit, that the UK couldn't use imperial measurements because, of course, EU directives insisted that there needed to be metric measurements, although I should say that in the UK, metric and imperial has always sort of coexisted alongside each other, but the government will ask people what they think, whether there should be more pounds and ounces in the shops or not. The Labour MP Angela Regal is not impressed by this and said the government was attempting to weaponise nostalgia for a time few could remember and even fewer wish to return to.
Ben Wright, BBC News.